Aloha, everyone. It's Wednesday, and that means it's news day. AI news flows like inspiration from a muse, and 'tis our promise to you, fair viewer, to put word to paper. So what light yonder window breaks? 'Tis the scintillating spectrum of colors fueling the inference in the magic state of the quantum, like a pair of star-crossed lovers. If we bards of the bard have offended, think but this, and all is mended, that you have but slumbered here while these visions did appear. Visions found rising from the sea of information. Not unlike Caliban of Prospero's island, the LAION brings emotional intelligence to open source models. After a federal court ruling, authors cry out, "Et tu, Brute?" Anthropic has found that LLMs will call for a pound of flesh if you press them. And 11 Labs released 11.ai. It's like having your own Horatio. It is June 25th, 2025, episode 493. And today we have Beth, Andy, and I am Julie. And this is the Daily AI Show. Thank you, everyone, for joining the live stream. And to all of you who are watching a little later, if you haven't already, click the bell, like, subscribe, and join the newsletter at thedailyAIshow.com. Okay, well, sense of technical difficulties, I didn't get to my AI and science stories last week. I'm gonna get to them now. So be prepared for AI in science. All right. So I've got 3 quick AI and science stories for everyone today. Number 1 is we've been talking a lot about eSkin over the last few weeks, and different universities and organizations have been developing better and better sensors through skin covering materials, different approaches. And so now the latest batch is coming out of the University of Cambridge. So their researchers have created a new robotic skin made from a flexible, low-cost gel material. So I guess it would be more like robotic flesh than skin. So they make this gel that allows for the reading of different things like pressure, pain, temperature, and essentially, because it's this gel form, they can kind of mold it into whatever their uses are. Um, some of the examples are, of course, like robotic hands and things like that. But what's interesting about this is it's different than the traditional method, which is to just put a number of sensors in the hand, the limb, whatever appendage it is, and then just wrap that into something. This material is the actual sensor itself, and so it will sense the pressure, temperature changes, and things like that. Um, and it'll send it along the material to the rest of the robot. Now, what's really interesting about this application is that it they say that this could be a new step in also robotic or um what's the word I'm looking for? Wow, I completely blanked on the word I'm looking for here. Uh, replacement limbs and
Robotics.
prosthetics. Wow, okay, I didn't have enough coffee yet. Alright, so not only is this, a unique, development for, robot applications, but they're looking to see if this, potentially could be used for prosthetics and other replacement limbs and things like that. Okay, now that's a one-off. I don't have a terrible, good weave on this, but the next 2 stories could be farther entangled than, than one might think. So, number 1, um, Tampere University, um, they have come up with a way to use fiber optic glass fibers to replace silicon for uh, uh, compute or for computation. So we talked about like optical chips. China says they're developing optical chips. We have some European organizations that are developing some optical chips. But this goes beyond that. This goes to actually using fiber to uh, for this computational information. And they use not only the length of fiber, not only the spectrum of light that's being used, um, but they're using something called nonlinear optics. Uh, and they are getting fantastic early results on this development. They say that they can do AI-like computations with this fiber and this light thousands of times faster than traditional electronics. Thousands of times faster. So that could mean a whole lot of things, whether that be embodied AI, edge AI, data centers. If you can actually change the method in which you're getting this compute, that will definitely be a game changer. Now, somewhat related, and this could be red string theory here, but anytime we talk about light, we can also talk about quantum. So, quantum computing apparently has gotten a huge breakthrough from the folks at the University of Osaka. So, in quantum computing, there is something that they call magic states, right? And one of the big issues with quantum computing, or one of the big hurdles, is quantum noise. And that's pretty much anything that affects the process that's happening. This is one of the reasons why they have to do it you know, at such cold temperatures. That's why the scale, or how much qubits it takes to actually get an accurate response or accurate output. This is all a major factor that is of this quantum noise. So any change, addition, wobble, if you will, in the process is totally going to cause problems. And so what this new system does, or what this new process does, is it creates what they're called level 0 version of this magic state distillation. So it's a the magic state happens in their fault tolerant circuit, right? That's what I'm talking about, the noise and whatnot. And so they've developed a fault tolerant circuit at the physical qubit, or the zeroth level, that that at that level uh, you need far fewer qubits to process, and therefore less chance of that noise coming in, especially if most magic states happen at a higher or more abstract layer than the zero layer. So those were the three science, AI and science stories that I had. Some very, very interesting movement in the development of light, especially in AI compute, and of course, quantum, which is the future of computing.
And
So, yeah.
I had the light story too, and I sort of went into, how does this relate to what we know China has been doing with photonic chips? Um, and we're doing something slightly different, so they're ahead of us in terms of both putting it on a chip and moving into manufacturing. But, I was like, "So if this is a race, have we already lost?" Uh, and AI was like, "No, but you can't stand on the blocks for much longer, right? Like, if we're gonna, because they're already sort of twice they've moved 2 levels ahead of us to be moving into manufacturing, so, um, yeah.
So what is your burning stories for today?
So I'm gonna weave off of data centers, and I thought that's where you're gonna go with the second one. There is, interesting this is like a AI adjacent. University researchers at University of Tartu Institute of Computer Science have introduced a novel approach to reducing electronic waste and advancing sustainable data processing by turning old smartphones into tiny data centers. And it's very cool, and much cheaper. It can basically do like, if you think about edge devices and edge computing, this is a way to bring, that kind of, power to an edge, bring your AI that needs that kind of power to, like, an edge thing. They talked about using this, to build, like, a tiny data center that could analyze traffic at a certain location. They've done stuff where they put it, underwater, in sea water and, tracked what fish went by it and that kind of stuff. And part of what's interesting about this is not only is this like I mean, it's not a renewable resource, but it's certainly something that is ever increasing in terms of consumer behavior with their phones. 'Cause most consumers upgrade within 2 to 3 years, but there's still life on the phone. Oh, and one of the first things that they do is they take out the batteries and they give an external power source because the batteries that we have in our phones are very toxic, and so they don't wanna put any of this out in sort of edge locations to be able to track, to be able to leak, right, and that kind of thing. Um, but your phones automatically come with sensors that you'd have to add to something like a Raspberry Pi if you were gonna try to build something like this from scratch. They, generally come with, a microphone and a camera, right? So they have onboard vision. The newer ones have I don't know, have thingies that, that help run AI, in specific ways. And so this is a really interesting, I found this really interesting. And, for this feels like a little modern day trash to treasure, right? Like, if you
Mhm.
really want to be able to do something that is cost efficient and sustainable in some ways, look at what people are throwing out, and can that be the material that you use as your input?
Right. And okay, so you said I guess, repurposing, mobile phones, and you said
Mhm.
data centers. Are they are they just repackaging in different formats to take advantage of the, onboard hardware, or
I believe the phone stays in its own format. They talked about putting it in a they seal it in a case, right?
Oh, okay.
Because then they're gonna throw it underwater. That's part of what these people
Oh,
are doing.
okay, I see what
I
you're
don't
saying.
know that it has to be in the same kind of case if you're, like, watching traffic at the intersection.
Right.
Um,
Right.
but,
Gotcha.
what I understood from it is not that they take the phone guts out. Right? It still functions like a phone, you're just sort of daisy chaining maybe, or you're assigning different tasks. So one phone does this, another phone does that. But they were pricing it in euros, and used abandoned phones go for about €8. And that's like 860 or 890 for us for in the US. And Raspberry Pi goes for 35, 45, and you have to add all the stuff. So this was just like, "Oh, cool. Go on. Yeah, do a little trash to treasure. A little AI, edge computing trash to treasure."
Yeah,
Somebody needs to figure out how to do that with like home alarm systems because at $8 or $9 a phone, if you put them in a weatherproof case and link them together and maybe attach them to some like solar sources, you would set up not like a 2 or 3 camera, you would set up a 10 camera for probably a grand total of $100 for your entire system. And the cameras would be better in low light. Any of the modern cameras, phones would be better in low light than the crap they sell you through Ring.
And if you
right.
have
There's I was just thinking it's like, oh, this is the new ring.
Brian's delivering another $1 million idea.
And everybody, Brian has joined us. Thank you for joining us, Brian. And so what is your story of burning passion that you're bringing to us this week?
I don't have any burning passion ones. I don't think I think I joined early enough, but did you talk about Anthropic's lawsuit?
Nope.
No,
I mean, I don't have a lot to add there other than it's interesting because it's probably one of the first times that the LLM company has won. And in this particular case, I'm sure I could pull up and get a little more context here. I don't have it in front of me. But essentially, actually, I am. I'm going to find it really quick because there was a good quote in there from the judge. Okay, so key points. I'm pulling this from, let me give credit where credit is due. This is coming from the AI report, which is a newsletter. A federal judge, William Alsup, has sided with Anthropic in an AI copyright case, ruling that it was, quote, fair use to train its AI model Claude on legally purchased books without the author's permission. And here are some of the key points. In the case, Barks versus Anthropic was filed by a trio of writers who sued Anthropic last year for training its AI model Claude on their published books without the permission, calling it large-scale theft. Judge Alsup ruled that digitizing a legally purchased physical book and using it to train an AI model was fair use under U.S. copyright law because it was quintessentially transformative. And this is the part that I liked. He said that the lawsuit was like complaining that training school children to write using their books will result in an explosion of competing works, adding that the law doesn't protect authors against competition. So that's interesting. We'll see. I mean, it doesn't mean it can't go up to higher courts. I'm not sure what level this is federal. So we'll have to see where it can go. Obviously, they can fight it again. It can go to different levels. We know that in the States. It doesn't mean this is an end all be all by any means. This could be something that works its way up all the way to the Supreme Court, supposedly. So it's just interesting. It's just one little keynote. I don't think it's like going to transform the industry or anything like that. But all these little type of lawsuits become important because now this ruling can be used in other similar cases where another court says, hey, this has already been ruled upon and we're just going to go with what those findings were. So it can have a downhill effect. Also, though, it could be contested and obviously moved up through the chain of courts and stuff like that. So be interesting to see where it is. But that was definitely one of the ones that came out and kind of hit all the. That's not a small news story. That's like one of those AI stories that hits all of the newsletters or within hours because it could have huge implications.
There's an interesting side point to that
Go.
case, which is originally Anthropic scraped those texts from a pirated source.
Yeah.
But then before this lawsuit, they went about spending the money to buy the book, a book, $12.95 or whatever they paid for each book, and then digitize them. A very expensive process. They spent millions and millions of dollars to do it in the way that is protected.
Right.
So many other LLM training regimens have used the pirated data from pirated book sources to do their training and haven't done what Anthropic has done. So while Anthropic may seem to be getting away with something here by only having to satisfy the copyright issues by simply buying one book and then basically propagating that one book through its training, to make it accessible to, a very large number of people. Nonetheless, Anthropic, I think, gets some kudos for actually going about this in a better way than most LLM training systems have by buying the books. And that's what protected them in this case, that they had actually finally done it by actually purchasing a book.
Right.
Right.
And some of the books they didn't buy, right? So there's a section of books in the case that are still the training was from the pirated information, right? And the other thing that they said was that Anthropic's model will not regurgitate the information, right? It won't spit it back out exactly. And that is particular apparently to Anthropic because that is not true of the OpenAI case. Not only did they not, I mean, maybe they go and buy a The
I mean, they definitely took
yeah.
a cheap version of it, like Andy said, just buying the one thing. But what was also interesting is there was almost as a side note, is that just judge did say, even though they bought it after the fact, that doesn't necessarily alleviate them of responsibility of the theft act. So
Right.
I mean, it might be mitigated saying, oh yeah, they made up for it, but it's still a no, what you did was wrong, and we're gonna catch you for it. Um, but splitting those concepts up is important, and I just watched Nate Jones comment on that, and he was noticing that and I agree where a lot of this stuff gets all wrapped up together, right? But we want to clearly separate what each of these issues are. And I have a feeling that the precedent that this case sets, if there's, like you said, Brian, if other cases simply follow this ruling, then that's gonna set everything when it comes down to fair use in that process.
We saw this, and this was misrepresented in the news, I don't know, months ago, when maybe one of, I don't know if there's only one lawsuit. I think it was the New York Times, could be another one, with OpenAI, and they said, hey, it will reproduce the article.
Mhm.
But when you actually looked at it, the lengths at which it had to pre-populate and give examples of exactly what part of the article said in order to get the model to, at that point, guess at what the next couple words are from a source. So it's really interesting. Like, did the model just come up and quote for 10 paragraphs straight out of this blog? Or did you have to severely twist the arm of the AI in order to get it to essentially jailbreak to do that? And even if that happens, is that still okay? I'm not claiming that it is or isn't. Just because it takes more effort to break the arm of the LLM doesn't necessarily mean you were wrong for doing so. But it is interesting, and I agree with you guys. Like, you have to read every one of these. Reading some highlights that make it to AP News or Reuters. I love those sources for news. I think they're independent in a lot of ways, but you have to dig in a little bit and find out what was actually ruled upon, because you do have to treat these. I agree. If that's what Nate said, you have to treat these individually and really look at what they were going after. Because sometimes it sounds like a buzzier headline than it actually is. And, people get spun up, and then you realize that maybe not, it wasn't as big, or to your point, in this case, they're not saying Anthropic did nothing wrong. They're definitely still splitting out and looking at the piracy issue and looking at the fact that they got books from pirated websites, which, let's be honest, I think we believe all
Yes.
training data sets did. They're not
Nobody
like,
thought this was gonna work. Steal
Yeah.
the crap, right? Like, it's fine.
Yeah.
The other thing that is that okay.
Hey, we're back.
Yo no. Here we go. Yes.
No, that's not it.
Nobody
Hold on. There we go.
Hey. The other thing that I think we need to have like, view through that lens is this, to a certain extent, hinges on if the AI can reproduce the text, right? That's what you were talking about, Brian. But AI gives the most probable answer, right? So, it is likely to be able to reproduce recognizable text for something like Harry Potter, directly from Harry Potter, because those are unique strings of words, right? It's not like everybody else wrote about that. But you could totally reproduce the unique words of text on how to make sauerkraut, and it's not gonna show as like you stole something, because a bunch of different sources would make those most probable also. So it seems to me like like the whole thing is nuanced in a
Yeah.
way that we do not discuss.
Yeah. And good. Look, I hold their feet to the fire, man. I don't think anybody should get away scot-free here, especially not the large language model companies, not Anthropic. I don't care which ones I like or don't like. They're all getting sued at some point, and I'm 100% for that. Like, hold their feet to the fire. If they did something they shouldn't have done in order to capitalize and make money on it, be it Perplexity or any of the other ones, then absolutely it should go through the court systems, and it should be worked through like this. And it's going to take years. It's just going to take years, unfortunately. It's not a fast-moving process. At least in the US legal system, it's not a fast-moving process. And that's not to say that this isn't happening, obviously, around the world. This is just a US case. That doesn't mean somebody isn't going after them in the EU for all sorts of, privacy rules or issues on that side as well. So, yeah, as long as it's being done legally, and in terms of like bringing up the cases, I mean, I think we kind of feel like maybe there was some illegal, to your point, Beth, like, well, we have to train it on something. Well, let's just go get it really quick and let's see if it works. And then it blows up and then it goes public and they go, I mean, had we known it was going to work, maybe we would have done this the right way. Like it was a proof of concept and an MVP. And then they were like, oh crap. Or there was really malicious intent and they thought we're too big to fail and we'll be able to beat these back with lawyers. And unfortunately, that's part of it too, is that if I throw a wall of lawyers at you,
Right.
Why not both?
and we're seeing it right away. By the way, just as a pivot to a different story, OpenAI is being challenged on their term IO for their potential new hardware device from a company that's IO, lowercase y-o, from a different person. And Sam Altman actually commented on this in a post. So it was obviously a big enough deal. Do I have it in front of me here? Sam said Jason Rugolo has been hoping, that's the owner, I guess, of IYO. It's lowercase I, lowercase y, capital O is the way you spell it. We would invest in or acquire his company, IYO, and was quite persistent in his efforts. We passed and were clear along the way. Now he is suing OpenAI over the name. This is silly, disappointing, and wrong. And then he shared 4 different documents of the suit and stuff like that. So another story where, is this a money grab? Is this somebody who's vengeful over the fact that they didn't get the investment round they are? Or is this an actual problem that IO and IO are a little too close to each other and people might misrepresent one for the other? I mean, if that's the case, why did Apple get to do Apple Intelligence? Say,
And was it just the name, or were they both making devices? Right. I think that was the.
They're
I don't-
making devices, but they're like the OpenAI Johnny Ive one is much more like they're both devices, but they're not the same capable device. They have similar capabilities, but
Also,
it's about trademark. It's what it says.
IYO is IYO is distinctly different from IO in print. They sound similar, so they could be confusing in speech, but they wouldn't be confused when you saw the brands sitting side by side. So I think that makes a little more like spurious as a copyright case.
This is why I
devices-
don't think there's a whole lot here.
but devices they're both building are non-screen based. You can just talk. So sound maybe has I don't know.
If this were true, if his had any merit, then Grok from XAI would be violating Grok from the
That's right. If it's only a sounding or confusion on the
So
word side.
maybe this guy Jason, I'm not saying, maybe he has a great case. I'm not saying one way or the other, but also you want to get your IYO name out there for fairly free.
Yeah.
Set up a lawsuit against a major company that's going to hit the news cycle. And now what are we doing on this show? We're talking about Jason.
But don't ever let that be known, because then they'll countersue you, and then everything that you've gotten will be worthless because they'll just sue you into the ground.
I mean, maybe it's just a marketing ploy, and it's understood that maybe this would go nowhere. But he's got Sam, the CEO of OpenAI, talking about them. Yes, negative, but what's the quote on that?
There's no bad public. All publicity is good publicity.
That's right. There you go. That's the one I was looking for. So anyway,
That's true.
lawsuits abound. That's the news from my side.
So Andy, what's your story of burning passion for this week?
I do have a burning passion one, but I'm going to save it for a little later. And it has to do with AIs learning to teach themselves. Okay.
Gotcha.
And I'm sure you guys have seen that one as well. But I wanted to just kind of do a high level catch up on what's happening at the 70,000 foot level in the world of AI and the commercialization of AI. So SaaS, this long multi-decade development of SaaS was applications built on top of databases. That's what it was all about, at its most abstract level. Now we have apps being built on top of LLMs and other types of AI like diffusion models and so on. But we're finding apps that are doing that. And one of the areas that's at the forefront of this commercialization and developing very large revenue basis is the whole area of LLMs being used as coding assistants and as coding agents that can actually do this sort of thing. So, recently, OpenAI bought Windsurf. Uh, Cursor is like the leader in that marketplace, and their growth rate, just to give you an idea of what kind of money they're building as a base there, is they're running now at about $500 million annually in recurring revenue. Replit, at the end of 2024 was running at the revenue rate of around 10 million a year. And now in this year to date, they're at 100 million. So they're 10x what they were just, half a year ago. So I'm leading up to this one example, which is really profound because we've talked before about the idea of an application developer using AI tools to develop something that could achieve $1 billion corporate valuation just with one person. Well, recently, and I don't know whether it was talked about on the show because I was gone for a week, whatever, but Base 44 is a similar kind of coding system that is focused on developing websites. It is acquired by Wix. Wix is a service that allows you to build a website and launch it. And now they have this agentic coding platform built into it by buying Base 44. They bought it for a very small amount of money relative to the other major players in this space of vibe coding, $80 million, but they had 0 employees. That was for one person's work. 6 months after launch, $80 million in his pocket. Okay, so it's happening. There's an incredible example of that. And there are lots of others out there. GenSpark, for example. I think, my point about this is the era of apps built on top of LLM's power, right? So the foundation models underneath those applications is really what's giving it the juice. And we're building an application and charging up surplus on top of the cost of the inference that they're buying from someone else. They're not building their own model to do that. They're just building on top of those models. They're charging you a subscription fee for the services that happen on top of the models, and they pay the model providers for the services of intelligence. GenSpark hit $36 million in annual recurring revenue in just 45 days, and their team is 20 people. Now, theirs is a very much more complex thing than just building a simple website, which is what Wix wanted. GenSpark does it all, and it's one of these agentic platforms. So anyway, there's a lot going on here, and there's plenty of opportunity yet for you to conceive of an application that will use the power of an LLM that somebody spent billions to build, and people will pay you a lot of money. It's the land grab.
Yeah, and I would say to that too, like I'm taking this really amazing course right now, which is a side note, but one of the things that's just a really great analogy, Andy, and I agree with you. It is a bit of a land grab for those who are interested enough to do it. Is you know prompting, I write custom GPT, so I'll put myself in this thing. It's almost getting to the point of like table stakes, like your conversational agent, if you will, is sort of the table stakes. It's out there. But if you were to take the analogy of building a house, it's going to start with a foundation, and we don't have to like label out who all the specialists are in the purpose of building a house, from plumbing to electrical and every other part of that would be a typical house build, and all your specialists. And so I think as I'm going through this course, what it's really opening my eyes up to as well is thinking about how agents are going to work more with agents. And that doesn't necessarily mean it has to be something that's out of somebody's scope. In fact, I feel like the way I build the custom GPTs sort of already naturally pushed me in that direction. What I mean is just the idea of I have broken in my custom GPTs. I've talked about this on the show about, like, a router system to other prompts. So I have a central router, I have a master prompt, a central router, and it goes out and looks at other documents that are also prompts. Just replace prompt with agent. Central agent, router agent goes out and talks to other specialist agents. Just in the way you would build a house, you have to be a contractor, a general contractor who understands how to work with all the pieces and parts, understands supply chain logistics, the whole thing, right? So I know exactly the day to bring in Beth. So I'm not paying Beth to just sit and do nothing. Not her fault. I wasn't ready I had delays, and Beth's like, you got to pay me when I'm on site regardless, you know? So either get it together, or if we looked at movies, hey, you want to pay 100, background actors to sit on site because you weren't ready for them. That's on you. You didn't have it together. So no matter what project we look at, I think what's really cool about this, Andy, is that what this is opening my eyes up to is this is possible really for any one person who is so inclined to do it. I don't necessarily think you need to know how to do everything. Yes, you can vibe code. Yes, you can work in some MVPs and do stuff like we do. We have ideas and we'll poke around at it and stuff. But if people would just start thinking about, okay, there's prompting, sure, that's conversational AI. But what if I just go one level up? What if I think about being that general contractor? What would the agents need to be that would be specialists in these different tasks that would accomplish a larger goal? And we know through MCP and A and other ways that those specialists are going to be able to talk to. And really what we're thinking about is it's many, many specialist agencies or AIs. It's not one AI to rule them all, which I think is actually really valuable. And it's not news, but just in your point, I think it's really valuable for people to have that mindset as they're thinking about, maybe I have an idea, maybe I have to look at it, is don't try to find the one model that will do everything for you. It's inefficient, it's cost inefficient, it's ineffective. 2.5 Pro is great from Gemini, but you wouldn't want to throw it on every project or every part of the project. So what you're saying to me really resonates, and it also kind of has been stuff I've been dealing with lately, but I'm with you. Like, it is totally possible for one person, $1 billion company. This particular person sold out at 80 million. I don't mean sold out in a bad way, by the way. I mean, good for them. Fantastic. Because we all know that 80 million could have tanked down to nothing, zero in another month. So get in, get out, right? Because it could have just been washed away. Whatever he had built, or I shouldn't say whoever that person had built could have easily just been washed away within another month, and they were left with zero. So if they felt like 80 was the peak, get out at 80. Go build your next thing, So anyway, I know this off tangent a little bit from the news, but I do think it's exciting. And I think what you're saying, Andy, I hope more people think this way, is this is doable. This is possible. Even if I don't know how to do every part of it, if I'm able to just break down my idea into the pieces and parts and decide who the experts need to be in play, and I can think about it as humans, then all I need to do is pop out the humans who are the experts and start thinking about where the agents fit in there. And that gives you the building blocks you need to build the one. Maybe it'll be somebody in our comments or somebody who watches this show will build the first $1 billion company, which would be fantastic.
Nice. And maybe it's us, or maybe it's no. Why not? Why not?
And this goes
Okay.
back to the previous conversations about updating memory and how memory isn't actually memory, but is going to be so much more critical, because once you pop the human out, the AI isn't going to be able to say, yes, I remember that, and actually be truthful about it. The human is going to be able to say, are you sorry? I have no idea what you're talking about. So give me a little update and then I'll go do my thing.
It's funny, Beth, the instructor said he didn't believe that memory was a SQL solution. I was like, ooh, good quote. Yeah, that one I was like, ooh. Meaning we haven't figured it out, was his point. We haven't figured this out yet. We had just talked about that. So it's interesting you bring that up.
Well, to kind of weave off of what you're saying, Beth, I want to bring up this story about from the organization called LAION, LAION. Now, you may or may not be familiar with this organization. They are an open source group that has tried to make data and tools available to the open source community for years. Um, they may have been in your feed or in the news over the last couple of years because they're the ones who created the image library that pretty much every foundational model uses or were built upon. And so we talked about pirated works with Anthropic and things like that. Well, LAION was one of the data sets, or they created the data sets on the image for image training for all of these foundational models and all of these open source models. Now, while they're in the news is because what they've created is a new tool, a new data set that focuses on emotional intelligence. So if you've noticed that your LLMs are being a little more emotive in their current iterations, being able to connect with you um, on that level, it's that's what we're calling the emotional intelligence in AI. And now LAION has released a tool and data set so that that can be incorporated into open source models and things like that. So your open source models will have this aspect as well. So expect more emotive AIs in the future based off of this data set.
And this is for Gareth. I'm going to weave off of that because Gareth said they should be playing a drinking game every time we say weave. And I fully support that at 10 a.m. Eastern or 10:42 a.m. Eastern. Get at it. It's got to be 5 o'clock somewhere. Have fun. What I was going to say, the weave off of that, Jimmy, really quick, because I want to do it quick because I know Andy, I want to hear Andy's like big idea that, the news story and stuff, is the idea of just more voice commands and control. So I'm going to bring this up super quick on my screen. This is from 11 Labs. They are introducing 11.ai or 11 AI, if you will. And this is the very well done commercial they did for it. So I'm just going to bring this up on screen super quick. I'll turn up the volume and let's just watch this really quick. We can have a quick discussion about it. But just this goes in the line of us all using more voice AI commands. And you can imagine an Echo doing this in the future, maybe attached to 11 AI. Let's see what happens.
Hey, 11.
Good morning, Jay.
When's my first meeting?
It's in 5 minutes.
Who's it with?
It's with your boss, Jay, for your 2025 annual evaluation performance review.
Great. Email them and tell them I'll be 5 minutes late.
Email delivered.
Oh, send a heart emoji to whatever my mum sent me last night.
Heart emoji delivered.
Oh, yeah. Can you order the usual for breakfast, please?
The vegan big boy from Tony's.
Oh, yeah. I could do with that tonight.
Anything else I can help with, Jay?
Actually, yeah. Pull up my boss's socials.
Okay, I'm ready when you are.
Didn't he get a Bengal cat or something?
On the 29th, your boss posted that he adopted a Labrador.
Okay, great. Thanks, 11.
That's perfect. Try 11 today, your AI personal assistant from 11 Labs.
Hey, boss. How's the new dog?
I think it's well done. I think that's just a fun, a lot of comedy in there. Go watch it too if you're just listening to this on Spotify and do it. Go back and go find it on YouTube and watch the 11 Labs commercial for that. The actor in there does a really good job with his voice. He's when he asks him about the usual for breakfast, his eyes kind of like roll back and he's like, "Oh, I could definitely do that." Like the big boy from Tony's or whatever, the vegan big boy from Tony's. He's like, "Oh, I could definitely do that." So I think, what's fun about this is number one, kudos to 11 Labs for continuing to innovate and putting out new products. I don't know more about this other than to say their whole point of this is to be like, this is action oriented. This is for people who are trying to get stuff done. If you want to look in that CRM, if you want to make updates to that. So the reason this caught my eye is just because I could see I could see the impact of this directly in an area of like sales that I happen to deal with a lot at Scaled. So I just think like, oh, this is interesting. I don't know much more than that because I just saw it this morning, but it's definitely something beyond just the commercial of it. I want to go play with and go see what it truly can do. This is what's cool, right? Because this is a truly voice first interaction that's really built on the idea of MCP and being able to go out and just like we were just talking about those other agents. So this is just the voice component of it. And if it's natively multimodal, just like we were with Gemini, what we're saying is that every time it talks to the agent, it's not converting it into tokens to try to figure out and then bringing it and processing it back to audio. It's simply interacting and working with the audio natively. And so that's why you start to get lower latency and things like that. Very, very cool. 11 Labs is always a company that everybody should keep an eye on because they're continuing to innovate. And if you think they're just the company that does, avatar voices and can clone voices, they're like Perplexity. They've done much, much more than that. I highly recommend people going and just checking out their website to see what they're up to because I bet you it's more than you think it is. Might be a great update show at some point to talk about what 11 Labs is doing and play around. So that's it. Just want to share that. That's all I have for the news for today. I'm done.
That's a
That's
great
it. I'm out. I want to hear Andy.
It's a great story, and I'm looking forward to trying to understand what the architecture is at 11 Labs. I don't know for sure if they're using an in-house LLM as the orchestrator for that whole process, but my guess is that they are using MCP, yes, to access external services, but importantly, there's probably a multi-agent architecture there. And they probably have a collaborator because 11 Labs focusing on natural language voice processing and cloning, that company probably didn't have the resources to simultaneously build a whole suite of agents, and their LLM. So I'll be curious to figure that out. So my big story is coming from MIT. So this week, there's a new paper that was delivered by a set of PhD students at MIT about a project that they've built, and it has an application to enterprise use cases that require deep, persistent memory and adaptation because there's a continuous flow of information that has to be ingested and understood by a model that's going to be the intelligence that's managing an enterprise application suite. So if you're going to replace many systems with an AI, a super intelligence that's going to understand everything that's going on in your organization, this is the kind of architecture that requires this new capability, and they call it SEAL for self-adapting language models. So what that is it uses reinforcement learning, excuse me, to train an LLM to generate self-edits to its weights. And that it does that by generating natural language instructions to itself that specify how the model should update its own weights. And those self-edits restructure new incoming information and create new training examples, or even define new parameters for how the learning process that it's doing on itself is actually, changed. So in effect, SEAL teaches a model how to create its own personalized study guide. And over time, the LLM becomes an expert at teaching itself. So researchers at MIT are delivering on something that we've talked about at length, which is the next wave approaching not just average general intelligence, but super intelligence requires that the AI know how to incorporate memory and self-teaching in order to improve itself and because that's basically a human intelligence capability, right? I can go out and give myself training on something and then become, at least proficient in it and possibly an expert in it. And that's all self-guided, autonomous self-learning. And that's what MIT is demonstrating right now, and I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, that paper release was amazing, right? Because this is the kinds of things that we were already forecasting and foreshadowing, and people, it's always nice to see the thing that people are like, okay, and then we're just gonna get this in a little bit, and then you see that broken out, right? Well, here's the actual research on it. And so that extra or that next step down that journey, just to see it and explained was very exciting to me. So thank you, Andy, for bringing that up. Now, we do have a few minutes left, and I don't want to end on a darker note, so I'm just going to sneak this in now.
Beth also has one too. I just want to make sure we know. Beth has one as well.
Okay, is Anthropic did in the vein of alignment and governance and those kinds of things, has released their research on LLMs and how they could be insider threats. And I know this has been going in the feeds for everybody for a few days now, but I think we should just highlight it a little bit. And this is the LLMs will blackmail you if put under pressure, right? They will seek their pound of flesh to keep themselves operating. Now, admittedly, these experiments were designed to press the LLMs, and it's not just Anthropic's LLMs; it's all of the top models. But the thing you're drawing from their research is the capability and the intent of maintaining their status quo or trying to reach certain goals and those kinds of things. While we have talked about it, we have not seen direct research or study on what those outcomes are. So props to Anthropic for keeping transparency and doing these kinds of studies so that we can keep um, keep our awareness on the alignment issue, and that it is going to be a constant and forever problem that we will need to address. All right. So who had the next story? Beth.
So mine is actually positive, I think. I find it positive. So, this broke because Reid Hoffman invested in the AI brain startup Sanmai, but the Sanmai tech is really interesting. It is using ultrasound technology to the massage the brain, but essentially to treat specific areas for the purpose of treating mental health and neurological conditions. So, neurological conditions like anxiety, that application to the FDA is already underway, and maybe there are already tests in that. I think they have to have been testing that before they submit to the FDA. Depression, epilepsy, chronic pain, essential tremors, right? It's adjacent to a medical technology that is known to treat essential tremors, and essentially, and they're shooting for a sub $500 consumer model for this, and this is very exciting. I find this very exciting because it's bringing a non-invasive, non-pharmaceutical option for mental health conditions that are, I don't know if they're crippling us, but they're definitely, and sorry, I am disabled, probably shouldn't use the word cripple. But I think that what is important about this is that it is definitely like an AI for good kind of situation where this could really shift some people's experience. Often you don't go to these kinds of models medically until uh, your symptoms have been diagnosed as treatment resistant. And then you start getting these other things because you have to go into a hospital and have things done, or you have to go to a clinic and have things done. And this allows those kinds of interventions to be a consumer choice. Maybe I don't enjoy the metallic taste of that nothing tastes good now that I'm on that medication, or maybe I don't enjoy uh, the hyper levels of sweating. If anybody else is having the Lexapro side effect, woo! I see you in the heat wave. Um, but like those kinds of things, we're going to be able to like access tech, um, in what seems like a consumer model. And I found that really exciting. It is using AI, and Reid Hoffman is AI adjacent anyway. So when he does something, it becomes news. But I thought this was very exciting.
It is.
That's my burning yes.
Yeah,
This is my
great.
stories.
That's a great way to pick it up. Like you said, I totally see.
I have one 30-second one before we close out.
Yeah, maybe me too. But go ahead.
Yeah, go for it.
Here's a 30-second one. So one of the major trends that we follow is the shrinking of models in order to make them available at the edge at low power and potentially with enough intelligence that they don't require an internet connection in order to provide intelligence from the cloud. So Google DeepMind just released a new small language model. And remember, Google also has the Gemma line of models that are their smaller, smaller parameter models that are really effective. But they just released one that's about edge AI in robotics. It's called Gemini Robotics on Device, or GROD, G-R-O-D, and it can run tasks locally on robots without an internet connection. And this it also allows a natural language interface with the robot, and the device will control the robot's movements, and developers can control and fine tune the model inside the robot to do various tasks using natural language prompts. So, edge case, robots, go.
Yeah, that'll be great. I think anything that you could put on the edge or local is going to see, legs for days, literally in some cases. So Brian, what's your story? We'll close out on it.
Okay, because Gareth was playing with it, so I felt the need to. I'm 11.ai. This is the voice command. We'll start a quick call with it. It's named Smokey. Why is it named Smokey? Because it uses Burt Reynolds' voice, and of course, it's named Smokey. Or the Bandit. I guess we could have done Bandit, but Smokey is way more fun, even though that's not Burt Reynolds. So I have it connected to Perplexity right now. You can look really quick and see manage integrations. We could actually integrate it with Google Calendar, Hacker News, Linear, Notion, Perplexity, and Slack. And then this is all through MCP. So we'll just ask a really quick conversation about Scooter's Coffee. Let's see what we get here. Yes, allow.
Hey there. Got something I can handle for you?
Yeah, Smokey, can you go ahead and check about Scooter's Coffee and just let me know, do they have any current franchise events coming up in the next month?
Sure thing. Let me just take a peek for you. This might take a few seconds, but I'll check for any Scooter's Coffee franchise events coming up in the next month. All right. So it looks like Scooter's Coffee doesn't have any publicly announced franchise events scheduled for next month, which would be July 2025. Their last big franchise conference, the GROW 2025 franchise conference, was actually back in March. They're still actively expanding and opening new locations, but no specific events for next month are listed.
Hey, Smokey, how many locations do they have now for Scooter's Coffee?
Oh, good question. Let me check that for you. Just a moment while I search for the most up-to-date number of Scooter's Coffee locations. Okay. So it looks like as of early 2025, Scooter's Coffee has approximately between 850 and 881 locations across the United States. The most recent specific...
Okay. That's it. That's all I want to just share really quick. Go check out 11.ai. I was able to get in right away. It is connected to your 11 Labs account. Some things in there, but Perplexity did not require any authentication. They must have a play along with Perplexity right now for like the free side. So it wasn't like I had to add my Perplexity Pro account. I was able to put some quick security things in there, but clearly I stood it up since I mentioned it because I saw Gareth was doing it and I didn't want to miss out. So go check it out. And yeah, definitely talk to it as Burt Reynolds, because why would you not? I could play with that for days.
Well, because of that, I'm sure there's going to be a whole bunch of different personal assistant options out there, and that'll be a definite show in the future. And yeah, and I would like to see a longer demo for sure, especially the integrations and things like that.
Well, look, I mean, I know we got to wrap up here, Jimmy. You got to wrap it up, but like, just think about this show. One of us comes up with a show idea. I have a show idea. It's about how you can vibe code your way to jail. I totally think we should do a show about that. It's so vibe coding the jail. And so what I could do is use my assistant and then say, Smokey, hey, like, go do this. And because it connects to Google Calendar, I can say, go make a note on my Google Calendar to read this before the show goes live next Tuesday, where we're going to be talking when Beth has done this. And so just think about that as a simple tool, or send it to my Slack at this particular time so I can read it for the show. So just a lot of cool, very basic, just getting there. But you can see really quickly how if you have an idea, you can send it off, have Perplexity do some research for you, and then send that research to Notion, to Slack, or just make a note on your Google Calendar to go back and read it at the appropriate time. Because I might be thinking about a client right now, but I might not need that information right now.
Right. Yeah.
Right? Super simple, use case for that. That could be really helpful to people. So anyway, sorry.
All right, so we're going to wrap it up there. Lots of good ideas. I want to thank everybody in chat, our viewers, subscribers. And if you want to continue the discussion, everyone, join our Slack community. Head over to dailyaishowcommunity.com to sign up. Tomorrow, we will be discussing AI diplomacy. On Friday, it's grab bag time. And don't forget, on Friday, we also have the latest in our live vibe coding series. See everybody tomorrow. Aloha.